podcasting from sunny Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to Tips for Tour Operators, your podcast for growth hacks, marketing tips, and actionable insights from leading experts in the tourism industry. Welcome, tour operators. I'm Dustin Hoyman with Outdoor Adventure Marketing, and on today's episode of Tips for Tour Operators, Adam Arkfeld, host of the podcast, interviews Brent Ramirez. He is the founder and owner of The Booking Ninja, which is a back office support and customer service company that helps tours and activities. They're going to cover reasons why tour operators shouldn't be answering the phones and actually give actionable tips on how they can hand that off and train others to do just as good a job as they are, including breaking down the customer service process and improving conversion rates. Without further ado, here's your host, Adam Arkfeld.
Brent, thanks for joining us today on Tips for Tour Operators. To get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your business?
Yeah, well, I run a business called The Booking Ninja. We are a customer support company for tour and activity operators, where we help companies manage all their customer support and their customer service, handling phone reservations and email stuff, and really trying to take away a big chunk of the time that the owners and companies have to deal with, and make it easy for them to manage their customers while they can focus on what they're really good at.
Nice. And tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into the business, or what you were doing before the business.
Yeah, it's kind of a long story to get into it. I had, kind of fell into tourism through a long chain of events that we could talk about at the end if we have time. But basically found myself managing a large tour operation in Hawaii. And it was a really amazing experience, a really, really great company, and got to work with a lot of smaller operators. And in that time, I think that's where the idea started to come up for starting the Booking Ninja. And especially as I left that company and looking for something new to do, I really started to think about all the interactions that we had with the other smaller tour operators who struggled with managing the reservations. We had an in-house staff, like a dozen reservationists, and I ran an office there, and it was like a nice functioning operation for a larger company. But most of the other companies that we worked alongside of, they just couldn't do it, or they didn't want to do something like that. So that's where the idea came from, and just to see that there was a need for that kind of service for a lot of these companies, and just trying to make something that was accessible for them to use, so they could really help to help their businesses grow.
Now, what were some of those common problems that you saw from smaller tour operators that don't have the size or scale or luxury of a 12-person, call center?
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, you tend to find, the typical owner-operator scenario where you have the owner of the company who's an amazing captain of maybe a dolphin tour company, and he's driving the boats during the day, and then in between tours is answering phone calls, and then go home at night and sends out emails to people. And by the next day he's exhausted, but he does it because he loves it. And that's what we ran into, is you have a lot of these people who had a very specific talent and a very specific passion, but they get overwhelmed by all the other stuff that comes with running that. They really want to focus on what they do, but in order to do that, they got to keep the customers coming and keep them happy, and answer the phones when somebody calls and respond to their emails to keep the books full. And so that seems to be the biggest thing, is that there's a lot of these companies that they were just really strapped for time because they were trying to do everything themselves.
Yeah. So, basically if someone's an owner operator, they're either answering the phone calls themselves, or they might have someone on their team that's answering calls, or they might hire someone like you to answer calls. But regardless, someone needs to answer the calls, and that's where you come in, is kind of outsourced call center for just tour operators. And maybe you don't want to be called a call center, but it's probably the easiest way to associate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so talk to us a little bit about, so you have a tour operator, and we've spoken with a bunch of tour operators that, they run a decent sized operation with people that could even help them answer calls, but they just simply don't want someone else answering the calls. And that might be because they think that nobody else can do it, or they have a very unique experience. So talk to us about that, like the mental hangups related to handing off a very, very, very important part of a tour operator's business.
Yeah, it's really common. Every single company that we've worked with, they have the same concern, and it's a valid concern, because I think one of the things though that makes it so hard for people is because it takes up such a large amount of their time that they think that their business is almost more complex than it is. because they're starting to mix all the other things that they do with the business into just the customer support aspect of it. And so it's really common for owners to really feel intimidated and scared to let go of that segment. So they just have a really hard time letting go. So that's something that we try to focus on when we start to work with companies, is to really go in and try to break down their system, break down their company. Because I think that companies, when you start to break it down into different segments, you can really make it simple and easy to understand. Even the most complex companies, the company that I've worked with a company before that we did everything from like helicopter tours and zip lines in the same day, and it was really big, complex operations that you had a lot of moving parts and a lot of scheduling things. But compared to like just a simple kayaking company where I might think it's simple, there's still a lot of logistics that go in behind it. And so every company, I think they have their own, the details of their company. And since they're so involved in it, they think it's everything. You're starting to mix like hiring your guides and accounting and everything like that. You think of that when you're thinking of answering the phones, because it's like if you're doing everything, you kind of associate everything together. And so we go in and just try to help them say, no, this is a very specific part of the business that you're doing that wastes a lot of your time. Let's break it down into some simple areas to make it easy for us to understand, easy for you to understand, and it'll make it easier for you to let go of if you understand that it's not as complex as you might think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's so many things on people's minds, especially when that's not their only focus. So, maybe let's just expand on that a little bit. When you're bringing on a new client or new tour operator, what's sort of the process that you go through to really simplify the business for them? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening right now that are thinking, no, my business actually is complicated. And so maybe taking one that's kind of common and just saying, hey, like here's how we break it down structurally, so that we can effectively take these calls. And you're located in California, and a lot of your clients are not. So you don't even, are not familiar with their geographic location. So talk to us about how you do that.
Yeah. It's a kind of a fun process, because you can start to really dissect it and get to learn about the companies. But we typically break it down into 4 main categories, and then those will sometimes branch off depending on how complex the companies are. But every company, they have their tours and their activities. So that's like their offerings. And so we'll start with that, and we'll kind of focus on the bullet point list of what these activities are to really understand that specific portion of the business. Location, like you mentioned, is really big. And even though it's not something that's people have a contact us page or a map on their website, but for when it comes to the service side of a business, you get a lot of phone calls from people that are lost, and it's like it's a pretty significant time crunch to really spend time to understand that. And so that's something that we really focus on trying to understand, is we want to know exactly where everything happens and to understand the geography and where these locations are. So location is really important. The location of the activities, where people need to meet and where they need to go. When it gets into reservations and booking stuff, we really want to understand the policies and the procedures that go behind that. So aside from understanding what the activities are and where they take place, there's always going to be, like, every company has their own specific set of rules that go with it. So examples would be like a boating company. They may have a maximum capacity on their boat that the Coast Guard regulates that says, you cannot exceed this specific passenger count. And, that could be different for a walking tour company who says, I'm going to make my capacity of my walking tour is 35 people, but if I get 5 extra, then it's no big deal. My tour guide can deal with it. And so knowing those different little different processes and the policies behind it is really important. Other major things that just come up, commonly, just simple cancellation policy and how somebody will deal with the weather. That's a specific side of the business. If you really just break it down, it really helps see the big picture of the company. So you have your activities, your location, your policies, and then you have like the unique selling points. And this is the tone of the company. And I think that this is one of the bigger fears that a lot of owners they worry about, is they don't want to lose the integrity that they've put into their company. And I learned this just living in Hawaii and dealing with a lot of Hawaiian tour operators. They really have a local mentality where they want everything to have that aloha spirit, where they're sharing that with their customers. And they always, that was an initial fear with a lot of those operators, to say, well, we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose the aloha. We don't want to lose the level of customer service that we know that we give. And so that's a big part of what we'll focus on as well. So, but I think breaking it into into those four segments of your business, I think it just helps make it seem like a less stressful process, whether you're looking to use a company, like an outside company like us, or even if you're just trying to hire employees to do it yourself. I think knowing and breaking it down like that, it's going to really improve a company's ability to do that and to grow. It just helps them really manage and prepare for growth as they move forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you're right. If you're hiring someone, breaking it down by activity, location, policies, and kind of unique selling propositions is just a really easy way to understand the different variables that are going to come up. And what if, so for the operator that says that, you mentioned the Hawaiian operators and the local authentic feel. What are some of the things that you do to get over that with your people that are taking the calls? Because you're not taking every call. As a business owner, you most likely have more enthusiasm than most people that are taking the calls. But just tell me about that. Like, how do you do that?
We spend time talking to the clients. I think that the most successful and the some of the things that we do that works really well is like just setting up those training calls with our agents and the owners. And I think a nice part about what we do, I like to think of ourselves as more of a boutique call center. When a call comes in for a company, it's not going to go to a room that's got 200 agents on the phone, and any one of them could pick up the call. We try to keep the teams small and focused on the company, so they learn about the activities really well, and they get to know the company. I feel like all of our clients, they know who our operators are, who our agents are, and so we spend time with like early on. We'll do training sessions, even if it's just we'll do like a conference call with our agents and the owner. And just running through, like hearing the owner talk about it, like that's a big thing. I record those calls because I think those are the most helpful training tools. Like you said, owners tend to have the most enthusiasm when it comes to their business, and so I'll do that with our clients. Is we'll go through, do a recorded phone call and have them explain like what they do. Tell me about your company. I know I have it on the website, but I want to hear it from you. I want to hear your tone and the energy that you have in it. And we use that as like our training guide, just be like, okay, this is, when it comes to the unique selling point and like just capturing that company tone and image, this is what we're going to use. We're going to use their actual words. And so far that's the best thing, I think, is really having the owners, come in and play that part with us. We try to partner with them, and I think that's something that they actually appreciate, because a lot of the fear too comes back to letting go, and they feel like they're just giving up control over a big portion of their business, and which is never the case. I think that all of our clients are really involved, even though it's time consuming, and so, but keeping that open line of communication where they can give feedback and where they can know what's going on, and especially early on where they can explain about their activities. I think that's been a really great way to achieve that.
Yeah. Now you clearly get a tremendous amount of activity and phone calls and just inbound leads. You're you get just a massive amount compared to probably any individual tour operator. So with that, I know you have a couple different tips or tricks or just ways to increase conversions or just be a better tour operator for inbound calls. So let's talk about those a little bit. What are some of the different things that tour operators can do in order to, I say increase their conversions, but when we were talking earlier, you kind of said, you kind of made it more broad in terms of just being a better tour company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's some it's a lot of it, customer support it's what we do. It's, when you're in an industry like this where experience is everything, it's all about the customer experience and what they receive. I think there are some basic things that any company can really focus on and improve that process. you got to be accessible to the customers. And so just by offering multiple channels for them to reach out, people nowadays, they want different ways to communicate, whether it's they want to send an email in, they want to jump on a live chat, or they want to make a phone call. People want options because everyone's different. And so having that is really helpful. Giving the people the option to choose how they want to interact is a really big part of it. And because we do see that.
Which of those, sorry to interrupt you, which of those do you see as the most engagement or the most effective? We get a little bit of a glimpse of that with our lead generation, but what do you see as of those three or maybe more?
Yeah, I think that obviously I think the phone conversations are, as much as digital is making it easy for people to do things online, people talking on the phone, there's never going to be a shortage of that. I think people still want that human engagement. They want that human connection, and that's a really great part of this industry. Is it brings people together who, one, they may never be around other people like that, and have these experiences. And so I think that's still going to be the biggest part of it, is being able to have customers reach out and talk to a real person and get the information that they need. I think that's never going to go away. It's always going to be a big part of what we do.
Yeah. And so you feel like phone calls are the best. Is that the highest volume of inquiries that you get as phone calls?
By far, yeah. I mean, we've set up different channels. We have, obviously people have email. We have the live chat on websites. We have some companies that use like WhatsApp on their, they make a WhatsApp line available for people. So, but yeah, by far, phone calls are going to be the most popular way for people to reach out. Even companies that have a high volume of like online bookings, if you neglect the phone aspect of it, you're still even neglecting the customers that want to book online, but they still have a question that they need an answer to. And you do get a lot of those. So it's really important. I think it would hurt just about any business if they didn't fully embrace the understanding that they have to have, accessible phone lines and people there to help the customers.
Yeah, we booked a tour in Utah last year, and it was for ATVs, and I probably contacted 4 or 5 companies, and a number of them didn't even respond. It's crazy. And then even trying to get in touch on the customer service side can be difficult. So that's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of going back into other ways to increase conversions or just increase your ability to service your customers. I think making it easy to get in touch with you is a big part of that. So there's different things, make it easy for people to find you. You really want them to be able to know how to get in touch with you. So companies can do that in a simple way. I think one thing that we've asked all of our companies, or we do when we start with our companies, is we just look at like some simple things, like we'll Google their company name, look at their Yelp page, look at their TripAdvisor page. And I can't begin to tell you how many times we look up that information and there's like something that's wrong. Like it's the wrong location, or they have a PO box that's not even near where they actually operate the tours, and it causes confusion, or a phone number that doesn't work, whatever it is. So that's like a really simple thing that companies should do. It's just like Google yourself, look yourself up online, make yourself easy to find, reach out to companies like you guys that can help make them even more visible to people. Cause I think that's really important.
Yeah. And now, when that happens, does your team actually make those updates, or is that something you just advise your tour operators to do?
We do it with some of our clients. We have some like premium service packages where we offer kind of extended services to our clients, and we'd be happy to make changes like that. If it's something that's within the realm of what we're capable of, then yeah, more than happy to help out with those.
Great. All right, so being accessible, number 1, making it easy to find you, number 2. What else on the tips?
A couple, making really knowing your customer, I think, is important. You have to understand who they are. My wife has actually been coaching me on this lately. She's in the marketing. She's a writer. She writes marketing content, and so she's doing this whole thing about buyer personas and understanding these customers, like building customer personas, understanding like exactly who your customer is.
Explain a persona real quick, just for those that maybe don't know what it is.
It's a really complicated process, I found out, but just understanding like, okay, maybe one of my customers, you can build multiple customer types because you have those types of people. But maybe I'm a surf school in Hawaii, and maybe I'm a premium surf school in Hawaii. So way more expensive than the regular. So my one of my customer types might be someone in their early 30s, a business entrepreneur, or someone that's, relatively financially successful, and they don't mind spending a little bit more for having like that premium experience. And so, trying to narrow down like the age and the demographics of who they are and what they're looking for. That would be an example, kind of a generic example, obviously. But I think it's really important, because if you had that in mind, if you had that specific person in your head, think about that when you go do everything else with your company. When you're like writing your website or trying to write an ad or something like that, you really should be focusing on the customer and trying to figure out, okay, well, that's who is booking my surf lessons. This guy who's, from New York, and he's a venture capitalist, and he comes to Hawaii 5 times a year because he has the time and the money to do it. I want to make sure that everything I do is to appeal to him. And so I think a lot of companies, they get backwards, and they spend too much time wanting to just say who they are, but they don't really focus on who the customer is to really try to attract those ideal customers.
Yeah, and if it's the saying of, if you try to appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody. Yeah. And for us, it extends into, you have that persona, and you have maybe age and income range and things that you're referring to. And then for us, it's like, are they on Instagram or are they on Facebook, and what sort of imagery resonates with them? Because if they're more wealthy and maybe it's a single or a couple instead of a family, then the imagery used between families and obviously singles or couples is quite a bit different. So those personas are really, really powerful once you get them down.
Yeah, they're really helpful. Even like we don't make very detailed ones, but having like a generic idea of that, I think, is really helpful for any company. And it's also helpful just to be aware to look for it. I'll give an example. We had one boat tour company, and it was a couple of younger guys. They started it. They ran these boat tours, and they kind of priced their experiences a little high, trying to appeal to this audience that they thought they were going to get were like 20, 30-year-olds who wanted to go out on a boat ride and have a good time. And they quickly started to see that really wasn't their audience. Their audience was families. Like, they started to get a ton of families, but they got a lot of pushback because their prices were too high. And so we kind of regrouped with them, went over everything, repriced all their activities. And now it's like they're selling out constantly. And then they went from running like 1 to 2 trips a week to sold out trips every single day in the matter of a year. And by dropping their prices, just knowing like, okay, well, maybe that's not maybe our customer isn't who we thought they were. And so really, I think that's actually one of the other steps I was going to list is to say, listen to your customers. I think they will tell you a lot, whether it's when you're talking on the phone and they're not making the reservation because it's too expensive, take note of that and see how often it happens. And I think that's a really important thing, is to really listen to the customers and how they interact with you, and make adjustments to meet them where they are.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, I would probably imagine that listening to your customers means, reading between the lines. If you talk about pricing and they're like, okay, I'll call you back, which I'm sure is like the default, I'm getting off the phone because it's too expensive. That probably means something. And, instead of booking, they're saying, yeah, I'll call you back, and then never call back, right? So what are some other examples of that you've seen? I mean, you probably hear every excuse in the book, right? Or you hear, what are some red flags that operators should maybe listen for?
I think that one of the big things is to be flexible. I think some of the most successful companies that we work with, they have everything. Everybody has their pricing and their operations set up, but you have to be able to listen to the customers. And if you start to have that conversation, you're like, okay, I'm starting to feel like this person's turned off by the price. Maybe throw in some options, throw in some coupons that you could throw their way. Whatever it is that you can get them to come back. I think that's a big part of it. And the companies that we've seen that do really well, they kind of embrace that never say no mentality. They never say no to like turning away a booking. They always want to make something work. And whether it's discounting a trip or trying to find a new activity for the customer if the one that they wanted wasn't available, I think that's a big part of it. And we see a pretty wide variation of people and companies, and some have their very strict rules and they don't want to stray away from it. And that's fine. But I think the ones that you really start to see rise above the rest, they really do embrace the never say no mentality and say, well, we're going to do whatever we can to keep this person. Yeah, I think that's been a really good mantra to live by.
That's interesting, because I'm sure a lot of operators feel like those boundaries, whether it be pricing or hours or tours or whatever, are helping their business to a large degree, because it's kind of creating structure in a bit of a crazy world with tourists. But you're saying throw in don't be too strict, throw in an element of flexibility and really try and work with them, because I mean we listen to a lot of calls ourselves. We're not the ones taking the calls, but we listen to a lot, and we'll hear no a lot. It's constant. So you're saying be more flexible.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a big part of the industry, and that people don't really embrace. I think it's it's customer service. It's like when you go, it's anything that you can do to satisfy the customer. I think if you understand that and you really want to make them have that experience, you have to know that you can't just turn them away because you have a strict bottom line that you need to adhere to. Because you never know. I think you never know the customer. You never know who it's going to end up being, and you could be talking on the phone to somebody, and they're asking some general questions and turned off by the price. And if you can reel them back, that could be somebody that has a huge network, and they could be a travel agent that is just on vacation themselves, but then they could go home and start referring more customers to you. And so I think you always want to keep that in mind, that the value of giving somebody a positive experience sometimes outweighs you earning the extra $10 that you could have offered for giving them just to get them on to book the tour.
Yeah. All right. What's your next tip?
Just be flexible. I think one thing is to make things really easy. Going back to the easy part of it, I think it's important to make things easy to book. And so I'm still surprised when I see companies that don't either use a reservation system or they just have a very complex one. So I think it's a really important factor of everything, and that's important for even us taking phone reservations. When somebody has an outdated reservation system, it just really, it slows the process down, and it makes those bookings really complicated. And we have some that use really old or self-made softwares that just take a long time to get through. And it's the same thing when somebody's booking online. It's like this long process of going through all these steps to complete a reservation. And I think that's a big part of it. People are on when they're calling in, sometimes they're in a hurry, they're on their lunch break, they're on their 10-minute break, and they want to book this activity, or they're online trying to sneak it in at work. And, you want to make that process as quick as possible. So I think understanding, we do that when we go with our companies. I go through their website and I'll click through and actually try to book a tour, and just read everything. I just want to make sure it all makes sense and that it flows easily and that it's very straightforward for the customer. And, there's an increasing number of really great booking softwares like Fair Harbor and some other ones that companies can implement to make that booking process easy for the customer online, but also make it easier for them to manage on the back end.
Yeah. Do you have any insight as to what you've seen as the percentage of people that are booking online versus on the phone? And then I guess the other probably major category is like in person. I mean, because you have an element of online booking where you will, I don't know if you manually put it in their system or you go through the public side, but you kind of do both those. So what's the ratio that you've seen online to phone calls?
It really does vary company to company. I'd say if you were to, I don't know if it's an exact, but it's kind of a 50-50 split. And we see that with a lot of companies. Even I'd say most companies are probably companies that do online well are still at probably like a 60% phone booking, 40% online, maybe 55 to 45. But and then you get some that are, we do have some that are maybe like upwards of like 70% online bookings and 30% phone or walk-ups. So, but I would say most of them, I think pretty average would be just like, it's about half and half, which is, I've seen that be consistent, for the last few years. And companies will still get more online bookings than they had before, but those are companies that are growing and they still get an equal amount of phone bookings. But
yeah, interesting. During our initial conversation, we talked a lot about processes and basically owners also kind of tend to operate on the fly. They'll take calls and they'll just kind of rattle things off. They know their business so well. So when you're taking that over, you mentioned that there's a lot of conversation around processes. So talk about that a little bit and how and the importance of that going from an owner taking phone calls to someone else, whether it's you or an employee. Why are those processes so important?
Well, one, I think that they're insanely important to any company that wants to grow. If you're trying to establish your business as one that you want to keep growing, then you have to be able to duplicate what you're doing, right? And that's a really important thing for any company that says that growth is on their horizon. They want to really make that a focus. And so we really focus on some of those processes because we're remote. Everything we do is just communicating with the companies, and so having like very specific steps on how to communicate is really important. And so for example, we've had there could be a company that across the country, and they do boat tours, and they have a bunch of different captains and a number of different boats, and we need to be able to contact them. And so what we did is we set up a Slack team for them and said, let's put everybody on Slack. Everybody has phones, and let's make specific channels in there to kind of keep this line of communication really open. And that using technology like that, Slack's been a huge thing for a lot of companies, because it just really streamlines communication. I think a lot of companies, they would still use text message, but as soon as you start to try to grow, text message becomes really sloppy. It becomes really hard to keep track of conversations or even to know what's going on as an owner. If two other employees are texting each other, you don't know what they're saying. But Slack and other communication tools like that are nice because they're transparent. You see what's happening in real time. And so that's been a really big one. I think, that's something that I think that we've had the luxury of doing with our clients, is suggesting things like that, because most of our clients don't have time to research this. They don't have time to go out and research what a good email client is, or a good app that they can use to talk to each other, or whatever it is, or some kind of project management tool like Trello, whatever it is. They don't have time to research that. But since we use a lot of them, if we get into a business, then we're gonna, I always suggest it. I'm like, this is perfect because you have people in different locations, and as soon as you have that, it's going to create a problem with communication. And so let's figure out something. Let's figure out a process that we can use to communicate with each other. And it's sometimes down to if I send a message, then I need some kind of specific response. And that's, some owners really need that to feel comfortable that everything is being communicated correctly. But yeah, I think the building those processes are, it's really important. And other things a lot of people have issues with scheduling their employees. And when you're booking activities like we do, a big part of that as well is knowing what's available to book. And so that's another process that we'll work on, is understanding the availability calendar that these companies have, whether it's, knowing who's working and how many employees they have, or how many vehicles or how many stand-up paddle boards they have available, knowing an inventory and the personnel used to operate is really important to knowing if you can book an activity. And so, we definitely do a lot of collaboration and work with the companies to say, all of these things that keep your business running, let's just map it out. I don't put it on them to do it. We always try to help work through this and do it for them, so it's not additional work. But I think just, as we work through those things, I'll give a really specific example. We worked with a kayaking company they had a really huge kayak inventory, and they did kayaking tours in like 5 different locations in the state. And so one of their problems is that they always had problems with inventory, because if they did a kayak tour with 20 people that was going to one location, they needed to make sure that they weren't overbooking their tours in another location because they had 20 kayaks going over here. And so there is a technology solution for that. Their booking software had the ability to use those create resources and kind of categorize those kayaks into things. But that was something that they didn't even think to explore, because they didn't know it existed. And so
that just happened to be in their existing booking software?
Yeah. Well, actually, at the time they were thinking about switching to a new one, and the new one that they were going to switch to, I knew it existed. So I told them about that, and they were like, that was a kind of a deciding factor for them to switch. Is because I knew it was going to make a big difference, because they were just doing it all on paper. But I mean, trying to think about that from an owner's perspective, if you want to have your bookings open online, like my thought as an owner would be like, well, I would be afraid of overbooking my activities, because what if a group of 10 books over here, but I don't have 10 of those kayaks available, And so I'd be paranoid and wanting to like just constantly watch my booking calendar to make sure I don't screw something up. So yeah, I think it was really good, and gave them a ton of peace of mind, because now they knew that there was a technology process in place that said, if it was, kayaks were getting booked on this, it wasn't going to allow them to overbook it somewhere else. And that gave them a ton of peace of mind. It really made them comfortable, one, opening up their reservations online. So now they weren't afraid to leave tours open longer, and they're afraid to let companies like us come in and say, and to come in and book activities. They didn't have to worry about us booking something on the wrong time or day.
And for those listening, which booking software did they end up using that had that feature?
That was actually that was switched to Fair Harbor is when they did that.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Are there other, so you mentioned Slack. I mean, you mentioned kind of having the right booking software for this particular instance, at least. It was a really good fit. Mm-hmm. Are there other tools and technologies that you offer? You mentioned WhatsApp earlier. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but are there other things that you guys use on a consistent basis that operators might want to implement? Yeah,
definitely. WhatsApp is a great one, especially for any company that has an international, you have some kind of international, if you get a lot of international travelers, then I would highly recommend getting a WhatsApp line, because there's a lot of people that come from overseas who might have a mobile phone, but they don't have, they won't make calls on it, but they can communicate through WhatsApp. And so that's a really big one that we've seen. I can't tell you how many times that somebody books online, they put their international cell phone on there and their email address, and then we can't find the customer. You're trying to call them, you're trying to email them, you don't know where they're at. And I'll go in on there and I'll add them in WhatsApp, and their name pops up. I'm like, oh, I found them. And then I'll call them, and they respond right away. And it's because that's how they communicate. And so that's a really big one. Different things as far as it depends on what kind of interactions you're getting with your customers. If email is a big thing. I'm a big fan of ticketing email stuff. We use one called Help Scout to help manage the emails that we get, and it kind of keeps everything really organized. It keeps it in a ticketing format where you can see how long ago this person sent an email in and how long it's been since someone responded. Helps with just keeping things move quickly through the emails. There's a bunch of them. I'm trying to think now. There's the big things that I usually try to do, though, is one thing I really don't like is text message. I still find a lot of companies that operate through text message, whether it's through text message with their employees or whatever it is. And for those companies, if they still want to stick to their text message, one thing they could do is move to Google Voice, because I found that Google Voice is a good way to keep conversations running, and it's easy to access on a computer or on your phone, and you can make easy group chats that kind of never disappear. Text message, they just, as soon as you get a text from your brother, it moves down the list, and I feel like the conversations for text message always get lost. But yeah, I think communication tools tend to be a big one, just because there's always so much communicating that needs to happen in these daily operations.
How about on Facebook? Do you do anything? I mean, do anything that has a major impact as far as Facebook messaging goes, or is that a major platform right now? I know that the number of users on Facebook is growing just exponentially, especially on Messenger in particular. Yeah. Have you seen that be a channel for bookings, or really progressing someone down the sales funnel?
Yes, Facebook, I haven't done any actual integrations with Facebook yet. It really does depend on the client, and you can tell the companies that really utilize Facebook. We're going to start doing it this year. We have a live chat option that we put on websites that also has a Facebook integration where we can go in and get some of the messages off the Facebook Messenger. But it really does depend on the company. I've started to see it grow over the last year. Before that, I would say that we rarely got companies that would send us anything through Facebook. Now it seems to be more like our owners, they might just be managing their Facebook account on their own, and they'll send us messages to follow up on, and then we'll just continue the conversation with the customer directly. But I do see it increasing. It really depends on the companies, and the companies that really utilize the visual aspects of their activity tend to do really well on it. So whether it's Facebook or Instagram, those are the ones that I've seen. Companies that really are proactive in posting pictures of their activities, and those are the ones that tend to get a lot of interactions. Well, I mean, you guys probably would know better than I do, but in our experience, that's what we see. The companies that do well on those is ones who are active with the imagery that they have available to them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's imagery, but to be quite honest, I mean, a lot of it is just consistency and being out there and just the frequency of it and staying on top. Almost even more so than the quality of the imagery in some cases. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, is there anything that maybe we didn't talk about that you think is important for tour operators to know, just as it relates to kind of this whole concept of being a better tour operator and then transitioning phone calls away?
I think planning is a big part of it. I think you have to understand, where you want to be, and you have to set your goals to get there. If you have growth in mind for your company, then all of these things are going to come up. So whether it's you're going to grow in-house and you're going to hire the staff to take over what you're doing, you have to make you have to put the systems in place to allow yourself to do that. And so, take time to plan. I think it's a really highly overrated thing. And I know this as a business owner, you get so busy with everything that you forget to go in and just make a simple calendar. And I can't tell you how many times it's in this industry where I come across companies that don't make a calendar for the year. And it's like, I get calls and they're like, "Oh, I forgot that next week was Labor Day. When we're selling out tours and now I got to find more guides." It's like, this should have been something that was on your calendar all year, and it doesn't take long. You can take 15 minutes and go through Google Calendar and go through all of that. I mean, this is a simple step. Go through all of the holidays that impact your operation. So when you're going to get a surge, and just set reminders for a few weeks in advance to say, get ready for this holiday. And whether it's getting, making sure that you're going to be staffed, that you have your calendars open online so you have availability, and just be ready for the influx. Because a lot of people, they get caught off guard and they lose out in business because they either sell out too quickly and they don't have a way to accommodate the extra people, or they just didn't make a push to get those people. So planning's it's a big part of it. And especially as if you want to grow, and for other, for those operators, the owners that really do want to step out of doing everything, I think it's a big part of it is, like we talked about, I think just kind of having a system in place. It's a really important thing that everybody should start to do. Even it doesn't have to be complicated. I think a lot of people make it sound like it's an overwhelming process, but all you have to do is just as you're doing something, just remember it, or not even just write it down and say, okay, when an email comes in, I want to respond to it in an hour. That's a process. That's like something that you've just established for your company that now you can have somebody else do or replicate, So just start to document those things in a really, really simple way. And, but all of that, I think it leads to the bigger thing of just to not being afraid to let somebody else do it. The company, companies they're really complex, but having somebody take over this really time-consuming portion of it, it's not as difficult as you think. As long as you can separate your brain to say, they're not taking over my business. They're just taking over this one little section of it, and I'm still going to be involved. And I always think of, there's a really cool quote that I heard. It says, "Work on your business, not in your business." And we've all done this, where we're so consumed of being in our business, where we're doing everything in it, that we don't have time to work on it to make it better. And so that's what our goal is to do, is to really help our owners achieve that, to say, you know what, let us take this big thing off your hands. You should be focusing on these other issues. Let us handle this time-consuming task. And yes, you'll be a part of it. But that's really going to now you have all this free time to really focus on making your business even better than it is.
Yeah. And one thing that I always think about when a problem seems particularly challenging, or it seems like, how am I going to solve this? I just remind myself that there are a lot of companies a lot bigger than me that have solved this problem. And so there is a solution. I just may not know what it is. And that's really helped me kind of have more optimism and maybe a better approach to, if it is like, if someone wants to offload the phone calls and they're just feeling like they can't do it for some reason, there are more companies, and probably a lot bigger companies and more complex, that have done it. So there's got to be a way. It's just a matter of, educating yourself and figuring that out. So, but great.
And it really helps even like the dialogue, talking to people. Like I find that with our clients, just having conversations, they may never have talked to another business owner before, and just having a conversation about their business, they're going to start to have new ideas and come up with new ways, like start to fix their own problems just by having someone to bounce ideas off of. So, yeah.
Well, great, Brent. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if people want to find you and learn more about your business, where would they do that?
They can go to our website. It's thebookingninja.com. It's so thebookingninja.com. You can find more information out there. We'd love to talk to anybody that's interested in hearing about our services. And even if you just have questions, I'm happy to help out whenever I can.
Great. Thank you, Brent. We appreciate it again. And yes, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me.